The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted the moment the heavy oak doors swung open. Usually defendants walk in with lawyers. Sometimes they walk in with family. But today, the defendant walked in surrounded by 4 men in dark suits, wearing earpieces and sunglasses indoors. They moved with a military precision that cleared the hallway, pushing regular citizens against the wall. In the center of this protective phalanx walked Malia Obama. At 26 years old, the eldest daughter of former President Barack Obama, looked less like a defendant facing a DUI charge and more like royalty visiting a colony. She wore oversized designer sunglasses, holding a customized iced coffee, and didn't even glance at the judge as she entered. She walked straight to the defense table, sat down, and immediately pulled out a tablet, looking bored. Her security detail, Secret Service agents who are funded by taxpayer dollars, didn't sit down. They stood in a semicircle around her, facing the gallery, scanning the room for threats. It was a display of intimidation rarely seen in a municipal court. They were sending a clear message. She is untouchable. Judge Caprio watched this spectacle from his bench. He adjusted his glasses, his expression tightening. He had seen drug dealers, thieves, and murderers in his court, but he had never seen someone treat the justice system like an inconvenience to their security schedule. "Counselor," Judge Caprio's voice cut through the murmurs of the crowd, "would you mind explaining why there is a paramilitary unit standing between the court and your client?" Malia's lawyer, a high-profile political fixer from D.C. named Ms. Sterling, stood up smoothly. "Your Honor, my client is a protectee of the United States Secret Service. These agents are mandated by federal law to ensure her safety in public spaces. The courtroom is a public space. They remain." Malia didn't look up from her tablet. She took a sip of her coffee, the ice rattling loudly in the silent room. "Ms. Obama," Judge Caprio said, ignoring the lawyer, "remove your sunglasses. You are indoors." Malia paused. She sighed, a sound of pure exasperation, and slowly took off the glasses, revealing eyes that were rolling with annoyance. "Is that really necessary, Judge? The lighting in here is terrible. It gives me a migraine. And the disrespect you are showing gives me a headache," Judge Caprio shot back. "Now put the tablet away. We are here to discuss the events of last Saturday night. Case number 502, driving under the influence, reckless driving, and resisting arrest." Narrator: Before we see how a former president's daughter handles facing a judge who doesn't care about politics, I have a small request. I have a dream of hitting 1,000 subscribers by the end of this month. I'm just a small creator trying to expose the truth about privilege and power. If you believe that no last name should grant you immunity from the law, please click that subscribe button right now. It takes you a second, but it means the world to me. Thank you. Now, let's see the evidence. Judge Caprio: The report states that at 2:30 a.m. you were stopped on I-95 doing 95 in a 55 zone. When Officer Miller approached your vehicle, he detected a strong odor of alcohol, but he couldn't administer the breathalyzer. Why? Because according to his report, 2 Secret Service agents physically blocked him from reaching you. The judge picked up a piece of paper, reading directly from it. Officer Miller writes, "Agent 1 pushed me back and stated that the subject was under federal protection and could not be detained by local law enforcement. The subject then rolled up her window and drove away while agents blocked my patrol car." A gasp went through the courtroom. Fleeing a police stop under the protection of federal agents? That wasn't just a crime, it was a constitutional crisis. "Officer Miller," the judge called out, "please step forward." Officer Miller was a man in his 50s, a veteran of the force. He looked tired. He walked to the microphone, glancing nervously at the Secret Service agents who were staring him down. "Tell me what happened, officer," Caprio said gently. "Your Honor," Miller began, his voice steady but tense. "I pulled over a black SUV for erratic driving. It was swerving across 3 lanes. When I got to the window, the driver, Ms. Obama, was laughing on her phone. She looked at me and said, 'Do you know who my father is? Call your supervisor before you embarrass yourself.'" Malia scoffed audibly from her table. "I was on a conference call. I didn't have time for a chat." "Quiet," Caprio snapped. "Go on, officer." Before I could ask for her license, the trailing SUV pulled up. 3 agents got out. One of them put his hand on his weapon, not drawing it but resting it there, and told me to step away from the asset. He said, "She is moving. Do not pursue." Then Ms. Obama drove off. Your Honor, I've been a cop for 30 years. I've never had a gun flashed at me by our own government just to let a drunk driver go home. Judge Caprio turned slowly to Malia. The look on his face was one of profound disappointment. Ms. Obama, he said, you used the men and women sworn to protect you as get-out-of-jail-free cards. You put their lives, and the lives of everyone on that highway, at risk because you didn't want a ticket? Malia stood up, smoothing her expensive blazer. She looked the judge in the eye with the confidence of someone who has shaken hands with world leaders since she was 10. Judge, let's be real, she said, her voice calm and condescending. I am a high-value target. My safety is a matter of national security. If I stop on the side of a dark highway, I am vulnerable. My agents made a threat assessment and extracted me. It's protocol. I wasn't fleeing. I was being secured. You can't penalize me for federal safety procedures established by my father's administration. She smiled, a small, triumphant smile. She thought she had him trapped in a loop of bureaucracy. She thought the words national security were a magic spell that would make the charges vanish. But she didn't know Frank Caprio. Protocol. She threw that word at me like a shield, expecting it to bounce off all responsibility. I looked at Malia, then at the stone-faced agents standing behind her like statues. It was a terrifying thought that the machinery designed to protect democracy was being used to bypass it. I leaned forward, clasping my hands. Ms. Obama, I began, keeping my voice low but firm. I have great respect for the Secret Service. They take bullets for our leaders. But I have read the Secret Service manual. Nowhere in there does it say that extraction protocol includes protecting a driver who is swerving across 3 lanes of traffic while intoxicated. Protocol protects your life, young lady. It does not protect your license. Her lawyer, Ms. Sterling, shot up from her chair before Malia could answer. She looked nervous now. She realized that the security card wasn't working. Your Honor, Sterling interrupted, we object to the characterization of intoxicated. There was no breathalyzer test administered. There is no proof. All we have is the officer's opinion regarding a smell. And frankly, given the political climate, we believe Officer Miller might be biased against my client's family. Officer Miller gripped the podium, his face turning red. Biased? I didn't even know who she was until she rolled down the window and asked me if I knew her father. Enough! I slammed the gavel. Ms. Sterling, you are walking a very thin line. You are accusing a 30-year veteran of political bias to cover up the fact that your client fled a crime scene? Sterling didn't back down. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a heavy file stamped with red ink, confidential. We are not just arguing bias, Judge. We are arguing jurisdiction. The state moves to dismiss all charges based on the Supremacy Clause. Furthermore, she hesitated, looking at the agents behind her. The defense moves to suppress the dashcam footage from Officer Miller's patrol car. I narrowed my eyes. On what grounds? It's a public record. On the grounds of national security, Sterling said, dropping the file on my bench. The footage shows Secret Service agents, their faces, their tactics, and their vehicle formations. Releasing this in open court exposes federal protective methodologies. The Department of Homeland Security has flagged this evidence as classified. You cannot play it. The courtroom went dead silent. This was a power move of the highest order. They were trying to blindfold the court using a federal stamp. If I couldn't see the video, I couldn't prove the obstruction. Malia smiled again. She picked up her iced coffee, taking a long, relaxed sip. She thought it was over. She thought they had buried the truth under a mountain of red tape. I looked at the file. Then I looked at the prosecutor, Mr. Henderson. He looked defeated. How do you fight the Department of Homeland Security? But then I remembered something. I remembered that my courtroom is not a federal bunker. It is a place where the people of Providence come for truth. Miss Sterling, I said, pushing the file back toward her. You seem to forget where you are. This is a municipal court. We deal in traffic laws and city ordinances. And in this city, when you drive on our roads, you play by our rules. I turned to the court clerk. Is the video file loaded in our system? Yes, Your Honor, the clerk nodded. Is it encrypted? No, Your Honor. Then play it, I ordered. Objection, Sterling screamed, actually slamming her hand on the table. You are violating a federal directive. These agents will be forced to intervene. At that moment, the lead Secret Service agent took a step forward. His hand hovered near his earpiece. The air in the room turned electric. Was a federal agent about to stop a judge? I looked directly at the agent. I didn't blink. "Agent," I said, my voice booming, "if you take one more step towards my bench, or if you try to touch that screen, I will have the bailiffs arrest you for contempt of court. You may have authority in the White House, but in here, I am the commander-in-chief. Step back." The agent froze. He looked at Malia. He looked at me. It was a standoff. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. After 3 agonizing seconds, the agent slowly lowered his hand and stepped back against the wall. Malia's jaw dropped. Her protection had just been overruled. "Play the video," I repeated. The screen flickered to life, and what we saw wasn't just a traffic stop. It was a display of arrogance that made the entire room gasp. The screen flickered, and the audio hissed to life. It was dark, grainy footage from Officer Miller's dash cam, but the headlights illuminated the scene perfectly. We saw the black SUV, we saw the window roll down, and we saw Malia Obama. But she wasn't the scared target her lawyer had described. She was laughing. She was holding a red plastic cup, swaying in the driver's seat to loud music. "License and registration," Officer Miller's voice came from the speaker. On the screen, Malia leaned out the window. Her words were slurred, heavy with the weight of alcohol. "License, officer? My face is my license. Do you know who calls me on my birthday? Do you really want to do this? I can have you transferred to guarding a parking lot in Alaska by morning." The courtroom gasped. It wasn't just a refusal, it was a threat against a working man's livelihood. Then the video showed the agents stepping in, but they weren't scanning for snipers. One agent leaned into the officer's face and said, "Back off, Miller. She's had a long night. We're taking her home. Forget you saw this." "I can't do that," Officer Miller replied on the video. "She is clearly impaired." That's when Malia shouted the words that sucked the air out of the room. She yelled from the car, "Just go away. I make more money in a 20-minute speech than you make in a decade. Go catch some poor people." Then she threw the red cup at the officer. It bounced off his chest, splashing liquid all over his uniform. The agents shoved Miller back, jumped into their SUV, and the convoy sped off, leaving the officer standing there, humiliated, covered in drink, on the side of the highway. The video froze on that frame, the officer alone in the dark. I turned away from the screen and looked at Malia. For the first time, she wasn't looking at her tablet. She wasn't rolling her eyes. She was staring at the floor, her face pale. The national security mask had fallen off. Everyone had just seen her for what she was, a bully hiding behind a badge she didn't earn. "Go catch some poor people," I repeated her words into the microphone. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. "Is that how you see the law, Ms. Obama? As a net designed only for the poor, while you swim right through the holes?" Her lawyer, Ms. Sterling, stood up slowly. She looked defeated. "Your Honor, the comments on the video were regrettable. My client was under immense pressure. She had just broken up with her boyfriend. It was an emotional outburst, triggered by the flashing lights. It was a panic response." "A panic response?" I asked, incredulous. "Throwing a drink at an officer is a panic response? Threatening to exile him to Alaska is panic?" I turned to the prosecutor. "Mr. Henderson, was the liquid in the cup analyzed?" "Yes, Your Honor," Henderson said, holding up an evidence bag containing the crushed red cup Officer Miller had retrieved. "Lab results confirm it was a high-end mixture of vodka and cranberry, but more importantly, we recovered texts from the defendant's phone sent 5 minutes after this incident." Malia's head snapped up. "You can't read my texts. That's private. Not when it's evidence in a criminal investigation," I corrected her. "Read it, Mr. Henderson." Henderson adjusted his glasses. "Sent at 2:45 a.m. to a contact named Party Group. Text reads, 'Just got pulled over by some loser cop. My boys handled him. LMAO. I love having minions. Let's keep drinking at the mansion.'" The gallery erupted. Minions. She called the United States Secret Service agents, men who risked their lives for her family. Minions. I looked at the agents standing behind her. I saw their jaws tighten. They were professionals. They wouldn't say a word. But I knew that text message hit them harder than a bullet. She didn't respect them. She viewed them as servants. "Ms. Obama," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed anger, "you didn't flee because you were unsafe. You fled because you were having a party. You used the power of the federal government to turn a DUI into a joyride." Malia stood up, tears forming in her eyes now. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration. "You don't understand," she cried out, her voice cracking. I didn't ask for this life. I didn't ask to be famous. People watch my every move. I just wanted one night to be normal. Why are you ruining my life over a stupid traffic stop?" "Ruining your life?" I asked. "Ms. Obama, if Officer Miller hadn't been a patient man, if he had reacted to your agents pushing him, if things had escalated, someone could have died that night. You aren't the victim here." I picked up the file Ms. Sterling had tried to suppress. "You wanted to use your name to get out of this," I said, opening the folder to the sentencing guidelines. "Well, you succeeded. Your name is the reason we are all here, but not in the way you think." "You didn't ask for this life?" I repeated her question, letting the absurdity of it hang in the air. "Ms. Obama, most people in this room didn't ask for their lives either. Officer Miller didn't ask to be humiliated while doing his job. The families driving on that highway didn't ask to share the road with a missile guided by alcohol and arrogance." I stood up, leaning over the bench. "You have lived in a bubble of protection for so long that you have forgotten what the real world looks like. In the real world, actions have consequences. In the real world, you cannot edit out the parts you don't like. And in the real world, calling the men who are sworn to die for you minions isn't funny. It is disgraceful." I looked at the lead Secret Service agent. His face was still stone, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Gratitude. "To the agents in this room," I said, addressing them directly, "I apologize that your service was mocked in my courtroom. You are dismissed from your protection duties for the next few minutes, because where Miss Obama is going, she won't need bodyguards. She will have guards of a very different kind." Malia's eyes widened. She looked back at her agents, expecting them to step in, to argue, to call Washington. But for the first time in her life, they didn't move. They stood down. They stepped aside, leaving a clear path between her and the bailiff. The message was clear: you are on your own. "Please stand for sentencing," I ordered. Malia stood up, her legs shaking. The defiance was gone. The president's daughter was gone. Now she was just a scared young woman facing the music. "On the charge of driving under the influence, guilty. On the charge of resisting arrest, guilty. On the charge of reckless endangerment, guilty." "Judge, please," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'll go to rehab. I'll pay a fine. Just don't put me in jail. It's unsafe for someone like me." "You should have thought about safety when you were doing 95 miles per hour, I replied coldly. "Ms. Sterling suggested community service. I agree, but it won't be giving speeches at fundraisers." I picked up her text message log again. "You told Officer Miller to go catch some poor people. You seem to have a lot of contempt for the less fortunate, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to learn from them. I am sentencing you to 180 days in the County Correctional Center. No private cell, no special treatment. You will wear the same orange jumpsuit as everyone else." The gallery gasped. 6 months. "And," I continued, raising my voice over her sobbing, "upon your release, you will complete 500 hours of community service at the Providence Soup Kitchen. You will not be managing it. You will be scrubbing pots, serving food, and looking in the eyes of the poor people you mocked. You will learn that dignity is not something you inherit. It is something you earn. Bailiff, take her into custody." The bailiff moved in. He pulled her hands behind her back. The click of the handcuffs echoed through the silent room. It was the sound of equality. "Daddy, call my dad!" she screamed as they led her away. She looked back at her agents one last time, pleading with her eyes, but the lead agent simply put on his sunglasses and turned around to walk out the exit. He had a job to do, and protecting a criminal wasn't part of it. As the heavy door closed behind her screams, the courtroom let out a collective breath. Officer Miller was smiling. It wasn't a smile of revenge. It was a smile of relief. The system had worked. I gathered my papers and looked at the camera one last time. "There is a lesson here today," I said softly. "It doesn't matter if your name is on a building or if your father ran the country. In the eyes of Lady Justice, we are all the same height. And if you think you are too big to fail, you haven't been to my courtroom. If this story restored your faith in justice, do me a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Help us reach our goal so we can keep telling the stories that the powerful want to hide." I'm Judge Caprio. Court is adjourned.